Just before Christmas there, the WRC on the 22nd of December introduced new directions, new guidelines in relation to the conduct of hearings, new procedures for January 2022. The most significant change by a country mile from the procedure up to now is that both parties must have submitted at least 15 days before the hearing all documentation on which they will be relying at the hearing. So that will include any correspondence, emails, outcomes, reports from disciplinaries and so on, staff handbooks perhaps, contracts for employment, and anything to do with the case that either party will be relying on. They must submit those documents 15 days in advance. This is a welcome development because up to now I have seen and I have been the victim of the opposition representative dumping, quite frankly, at the last minute on the day of a hearing, a massive plethora of documents and folders and so on as their submission, where the case is ready to go on, it's ready for hearing, and you're ready to rock, and at the last minute you're getting this gargantuan submission from the other side. You simply do not have the time or the space or the clear mind, quite frankly, to go through it with any degree of competence and any degree of confidence. So invariably you'd be looking for an adjournment, in order to read the submission from the other side and see what sort of evidence they're going to be relying on, have a look at the documents and so on. That's a very unsatisfactory situation because all parties are actually told well in advance. 4 weeks probably is an average notice period in advance, and obviously of the hearing. And prior to that then you could be waiting around 6 months, 12 months longer to get a hearing. So for somebody to dump a submission on you, quite frankly, at the last minute could only be described as ambushing. This change in the procedures from the WRC, published on their website on the 22nd of December 2021, where, as I say, documentation must be submitted to the WRC at least 15 days in advance, is a welcome development. There's no doubt about that. If you are interested in having a look at it, just go to the WRC website, workplacerelations.ie, and you will find the document there. There's a number of points in the procedures that they're setting out. Most of them are self-evident and we have become familiar with. But that particular one, where the documentation on which you're going to rely must be submitted 15 days in advance, is a new thing. Now, having said that, the adjudicator has the authority to accept or reject documents after that date, but it will be at the discretion of the adjudicator. Just to summarise the procedures then, which they have published: 1, a person can submit a complaint or dispute using the WRC complaint form. You'll find this on the Workplace Relations Commission website. 2, certain complaints require pre-complaint steps to be taken by the complainant. For example, the National Minimum Wage Act and the Equal Status Act. Both of those acts require the complainant to take certain steps, serve notices on the employer or the person against whom the claim is being brought. So that's important to note. 3, the time limit then is 6 months from the date of the alleged contravention, and that can be extended to 12 months by the adjudication officer if reasonable cause has been shown for the delay. The adjudication officer, however, does not have the jurisdiction to go beyond 12 months. The WRC will also ask the parties to consent to service of documents by email. That's just a sensible, practical step. 5, the WRC can decide a case on the basis of written submissions if both parties agree. I've never been involved in such a case. It's not a bad idea, and if that is the situation, then either party can actually request it by email. So there is some cases that are very, very straightforward. The issues are very net, as it were. They're very clear, crystal clear, and it's a question then of the evidence, but obviously they go through the whole hubba of a big hearing over whether somebody got a contract of employment or not. The likes of that could be dealt with, I believe, with written submissions and with the case being dealt with on the basis of written submissions. 6. Mediation may be offered to attempt to facilitate the parties themselves to resolve the issues by mediation. 7. All documentation, as I say, must be submitted at least 15 days in advance. This is a big change. An adjudication officer can decide whether to admit documentation within 15 days or on the day of the hearing, but that is at the discretion of the adjudication officer. A list of witnesses, together with an outline of the evidence to be given by each witness, shall be supplied to the WRC in advance as well. 8. It's a matter for the adjudication officer as to how the hearing itself is conducted. Obviously, there will be evidence given on oath since the Zalewski Supreme Court decision. And hearings then are not in private, they are now in public. And the parties will be named and the decisions will be published unless there is special circumstances which will allow the adjudication officer to hold the hearing in private. I was involved in one such hearing where I requested on behalf of my client that the hearing be held in private. I submitted that special circumstances to which the legislation referred existed, and the adjudication officer agreed with me and held the hearing in private. It won't be in public and the names will not be published. Finally then, the adjudication officer can draw adverse inferences in certain circumstances. For example, where information has been sought under the Employment Equality Acts and the Equal Status Acts and has not been provided by the party, the employer, against whom discrimination is being alleged. So those those changes are worth bearing in mind. They are worth having a look at, especially if you're involved in a WRC hearing. But the most important one, I suppose, is the 15-day submission of documents. It's 15 days in advance. Whether that's actually adhered to and adhered to strictly or not, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see because, as I say, the likes of I've seldom got submissions, quite frankly, that far in advance. Generally, it's a last-minute job from all sides. Anyway, I hope you find this video useful. If you do, I would appreciate if you gave it the thumbs up down below. Thanks a lot.